which I'd be very hard at too.
Oh, shut up. Today we're coming at you with the hard truth about mana curves, so I'm wearing a hard hat. Welcome back to the Bulkhead. My name is Kale.
I'm Brett.
And today we're going to be doing some construction on your mana curves in your EDH decks. Don't worry, Brett's safe over there. He's got a built-in one.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to get into talking about mana curves in your EDH decks. A lot of what I assumed when I started the format initially was that I should be playing 16 7-drops in my deck.
Oh yeah,
and throwing them down every turn.
Yeah, it's like the competitive constructed formats are you're playing 1 and 2 drops, and
yes,
you know you're curving out at 4 max, and you're just going hyper efficient. And then coming from that space, you think, oh, EDH, yeah. You're just playing
it's
a
million
Christmas drops. Yeah, exactly. Anything can happen.
Exactly. And I think that leads people down a really incorrect road when they're building their decks. It puts you into a mindset where you're just like, I'll have one of these, and one of these, and one of these, yes. And in reality, you want to be double spelling, you want to be ramping, and that's why, most decks that we're playing 12, 14 pieces of ramp, something like that at this point, to get you to the point where you can play a 6-drop and a 3-drop in the same turn.
On that line of thinking, I would probably say the heaviest use in CMC would be at the 2-drop slot.
Yes.
Because that's where your most efficient ramp's going to be. Like ramping on turn 2 might arguably be the best play across the board.
Yes. If we had hard data like 17 lands for limited in Magic that shows if you play this card on this turn in this game, you're this much more likely to win. If we had that for EDH, I guarantee you a turn 2 ramp spell would be the biggest determiner of who is actually going to win that game, and then who follows it up with their land drops and stuff like that, the really basic stuff.
And I would say you're correct on that, because I feel like when you say that, my first thought was like, wait, what about turn 1 Soul Ring or turn 1 Mana Vault? And it's because that 2 mana ramp is so much less likely to make people be like, kill him.
Exactly. It's a much more natural, you just sort of...
Fair.
Exactly. Everybody expects that to happen.
Yep.
The thing that happens with Soul Ring is that you get targeted and or you keep a little bit more of a greedy hand because you have a turn 1 Soul Ring, and that'll keep you alive. And the same thing is true for Mana Vault, Mana Crypt. Mana Vault more so because it's sort of a one-shot.
Yep.
You pay 1 mana, you get the 3 mana out of it, that turn or the next turn.
Super powerful.
Yes, similar to a Dark Ritual style effect. The problem then becomes, if you don't have lands to follow that up, or if you don't have cheap enough cards to be casting, you're gonna end up in rough shape.
Oh yeah.
You gotta advance your game plan. You have to be able to play things on concurrent turns of the game, and that means not loading up 5, 6, 7 drops. That means playing the cheapest engines that you can, or the most synergistic cards that aren't necessarily flashy and exciting, but will get you to the next step in the game.
I think those cards are so undervalued. The non-flashy ones, just like the real backbone, doing the real work, unappreciated.
God's work.
Rampant Growth, Farseeks.
Yes.
I love Cultivate. I know it's point of contention when talking about ramp.
Yeah.
That's another one of my favorite pieces of ramp.
It may be falling by the wayside at this point, but it does fix. It gets 1 land into play. Make sure you hit the next land drop.
Yeah,
so there's a lot to love there.
So good
about that. Really helps tie together your curve, especially in 4 or 5 color commander decks where you need 2 different colors, and you need to make sure that you can do that sort of on time. That's super important. I love Cultivate as well for the same reason. Yeah. I have a special place in my heart for Cultivate.
And then if one of your opponent's ramping and you're not, you're just falling behind so incredibly quickly. It will be very, very hard if you're not on the same land count, if not close to the same land count as your opponents. 2 of the key ways, in my opinion, on winning EDH is card advantage and ramp. If you can have a grip of 7 or just continuously replacing the cards you're playing while being able to double spell or dropping huge bombs more than your opponents are, then that's a recipe for success, right?
Yeah, you can win with a ham sandwich at that point, basically, That's the idea of Niv Mizzet Perun as a commander. Super powerful, super hard to cast, 6 mana, very expensive. But once you have it in play, if you can keep that engine rolling, if you've ramped up to that point, if you've kept a critical mass of cards in your hand and you can protect it, you just chip away at your opponent slowly. You're just ping, 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 and then suddenly they're dead.
That's a perfect commander to talk about ramp and fixing. In our Brea video, we talked about do you play Mana Crypt in a Breya deck as a piece of ramp? And to me, I think it could be cut for other pieces of ramp that produce colors to cast Breya. That's the big thing. Are you playing pieces of ramp that are helping your game plan, or is it just powerful in its own right?
Right, exactly. And that's always a distinction to be made when you're building your decks, and particularly when it comes to curve considerations as well. You want to make sure that those Mana Crypts and those Mana Vaults are allowing you to do what you need to do in the early game and aren't just there because they're good and because you think that means that you're going to get to cast a turn 2 6-drop every time and win the game. In reality, that's not going to win you the game of Commander. It might let you get ahead and poke somebody quite a bit or kill them even, but you're likely to be taken down on the way back. And that's sort of the dangerous space that you can go down if you're not paying attention to your curve.
And then I think a good question is, so we're saying our curve is going to be very heavy at 2 for these mana accelerants. Should our curve also be heavy at 4 because of that?
Right, exactly. And those are the considerations that you can look at in your deck. Obviously, you'd love to be playing something on 3 if it can be a 4-drop most of the time. That's just going to lend you some additional value.
Yeah, and just flows naturally with your game plan.
Yeah.
Right.
And important to consider, obviously, always is what does your commander cost? How much does it cost? Are you playing a 6-7 drop commander for any reason? Then you really, really need to make sure that you have a critical mass of 2, 3, even 1 drops in your deck, because you've got the top end covered.
Consistently covered.
Exactly.
Yep.
Even if you need to recast it, it's okay if you've cast several extra ramp spells. You still have access to, whoever you want to be playing at those higher CMCs.
And then along that line too, if your commander, let's say it's not 7, but is at 4, how many 4-drops are you actually playing in your deck? We're hoping to accelerate on 2, and then I would assume if your commander is important to your deck, to play that on 4.
Yes.
So, I mean, you're not really hoping to have another 4-drop in your hand to play on turn 5, right? Because it just doesn't seem as smooth as it could be.
Yes, exactly.
So maybe you go less on the 4 if your commander's 4, or less on the 5 if your commander's 5. You're just like, I think your commander's CMC should have a big impact on that part of your curve in your deck.
Absolutely. And that's just all sort of like the behind the scenes work of responsible deck building.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
It turns out that if you want to play these wild 7-drops, whatever, there's lots of ways to do it, but you have to be responsible in order to get to that point in the game. We have a deck tech on the Prismatic Bridge that Brett made recently that has these giant meld creatures, some of which are more expensive and take some finagling.
Like 7.
Exactly. They take some finagling to get into play. And the original design for that deck was every meld creature that you could build. Some of them had to be cut because in order to make the 3 most powerful, most interesting ones shine, you need to make sure that you can get to them on a regular basis.
Consistently. Yeah,
Exactly. That's the whole game is consistency. And that's something that comes from the 60 card sort of like competitive format scene, is like the idea that you would always play 60 cards. You can play more, but 60 is what gives you the best chance of doing exactly what your deck wants to do. And
that's why you see the important cards there are 4-ofs in those formats.
Exactly. We can look to that sort of 60 card competitive space to see what we should be doing with our decks in Commander as well. Another piece of the puzzle is that it's a casual format primarily. It's a fan-made casual format, and that's sort of what we miss out on, or sort of absorbing some of those heuristics when we enter into that space in the same way. So make sure you're considering that your curve should look like a curve. It should be likely heavy in the bottom and curve up to lesser towards the top end, and your decks are going to run a lot more smoothly, and the super cool stuff that you're doing is going to shine a lot better if you work on deck building that way.
And I definitely want to make sure everyone understands that every deck's different. Some decks you are going to want to have many 6 to 9 drops. Like the first deck when I say that comes to mind is Kalia. Mm-hmm. Like I want those dragons, angels, and demons in there because the game plans to cheat them out. Like I'm not actually paying that mana, or if I am, I'm going to be able to double spell because I pay the cost with my mana and then get another one into play with Kalia. So there's a huge other ramp factor in there.
Yes.
But it's just like everything is deck to deck, strategy to strategy. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it is more akin to competitive Magic than our thoughts coming into the format as being just like as only being big and splashy.
Exactly. And this isn't just a suggestion for winning. I tend to think that if my deck functions appropriately, I have a lot more fun in games, which is what we're all trying to do at the end of the day.
Yes.
You know, for instance, in Garth, you have some graveyard synergies with Regrowth. And I think Regrowth is an excellent card to talk about in this space because it's a big creature, it's a ramp, it's whatever it needs to be out of your graveyard.
It's a DT in your graveyard, or DT for your graveyard.
Yes, exactly. We have a friend, Alex, who plays Vial Smasher, the Fierce, and he pairs it with a blue commander for the commander color identity. And one of the coolest cards that he plays, Temporal Trespass. It's an 11 mana spell, 3 blue pips, 8, but it has Delve. And so utilizing those different sort of mechanics, kicker, delve, the flexibility of regrowth style effects will allow you to play an overall cheaper curve, but make sure you're still doing the splashy, fun, hilarious things that you want to do in this format.
Oh yeah, definitely play the big cards in Modern unless you're playing like Tron. You're not going to be playing like 6 drops, right? Like in Delver, the highest creature you're playing is probably 2 mana.
Yes.
In Jund, it's 4. But in EDH, play those big cards just in moderation, or at least in consideration for what your strategy is.
Yeah. Respect yourself. Pay attention to the curve.
Yes.
And we mean that with the most respect for your fun and your enjoyment of the game as possible.
You'll have way more fun if your deck's curving out appropriately than not.
Absolutely.
It's just not close.
Absolutely. So let us know down below if you have any decks that break this rule, that are playing a lot of 7 drops, 10 drops, 12 drops, or how you build a deck with, like Kozilek the Great Distortion, really expensive commanders as well, because I think that's an interesting space to explore.
Oh, wicked, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this time on the Bulkhead. We hope to hear from you down below, and we'll see you next time.
Till next time.
Bro, watch out!